All right, let's talk about a principle called the fraud triangle. And before we talk about that, I just want you to think about a question for a minute. Why do good people do bad things? As we look at all of the unethical behavior that happens in business, politics, anywhere else, we usually find people who didn't intend to go out and do something unethical. They didn't intend to be someone who ended up going to jail, and yet they ended up there. So, how do people get to where they're doing things that they didn't intend to do? How do people commit unethical acts when they didn't intend to be unethical? So, there were some researchers that studied fraud and how to help companies avoid fraud, and the framework that they come up with, I think, gives us a pretty good idea of how we can avoid that for ourselves. And so this is called the fraud triangle. So the fraud triangle says that there are basically three things that make it more likely for somebody to commit fraud, and I think we can extend it to almost all unethical actions. So there's usually some sort of pressure. So there's some sort of financial or emotional force pushing you towards doing something unethical. So it could be, you know, I'm going to lose my house. I really need to have a good quarter, and so I'm going to fudge the numbers a little bit. It could be peer pressure. It could be a boss telling you to do it. So the first one is pressure. The next one is opportunity. And this is the idea that if it's easier to do something unethical, you're more likely to do it. Regardless of how ethical a person you are, if it becomes more difficult, you're going to be less likely to do it. The last one is rationalization. And this is where people find ways to tell themselves that what they did wasn't really that bad after all. So, for example, somebody might steal from their company, but maybe it's so I can donate to this great cause, or maybe I'll fudge my numbers now, but I'll make up for it later. And so, combining these three things, usually with every fraud, there's some sort of mixture of these three things. And so, when we think about in our own lives, how can we reduce our likelihood of doing something unethical? We can look at all three of these things and use this to pattern our lives so that we don't end up making these unethical decisions. So, for example, we can find ways to reduce the pressure we feel to do something unethical. And so maybe it's not working in a place where you're going to be encouraged to do something unethical. You can look for you can reduce your opportunities to act unethical. You can set up structures of accountability to keep yourself honest. And then lastly, find some sort of way to reduce your ability to rationalize what you're doing as being ethical when it's really not. And so that's part of why we're having you do your code of ethics assignment, is to help you have your own set of rules to make it less likely that you're going to break those rules. It's going to make it harder for you to rationalize it when you've written it down and committed to it. So another thing that's going to really help you to be ethical is establishing what I like to call the go to heck fund. So think about it. If you have person A, this person just bought a new car on credit, has $20,000 in credit card debt, and their house payment is the very max of what a bank will give them. It's 35% of their income. Person B has no debt except for their mortgage. Their house payment is only 25% of their income, and they have 6 months of expenses put aside in savings. So if you think about these people, who would be more likely to stand up to an unethical boss? It's definitely going to be person B, right? Because person A, they can't afford to lose their job. They have that increased financial pressure. And so another big thing I would encourage you to do as you go throughout your career is to think about establishing this go to heck fund for yourself, so that when you find yourself in a situation where you're maybe being encouraged to do something that you don't feel is ethical, you'll reduce your pressure to go along with it.